Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Braylon Williams, your 5'4" host, your sexiest man alive host, the man that looks good in any color shirt host, the man who is a multifaceted, multi-talented person. But anyway, this is another episode of Enneagram Restored Podcast, and I want to say thank you from the very outset of this episode for joining me, for watching, for listening. This is a weekly podcast that I do to talk about how the Enneagram is, in my opinion, like the best tool to help us become better people. I always like to say that it helps take the good better and make the bad good. So that's what I do on this podcast.
All right, let's go into these two, envy and jealousy. I gotta tell you right up front, I've never in my life used these words correctly. You're not gonna like how it turns out. It's not good. Let me ask you, if someone showed you their vacation pictures from Greece in the middle of your quarantine, what do you think you would feel?
Rage?
Annoyed. That's
Violent
funny.
rage?
Violent rage. Okay, so we're still coming through the pandemic here, so that's fair. If you had the choices of envy or jealousy. Jealousy. Like, you would say envy. You, sir, your name?
Carl.
Carl? You, sir, would be correct. So it is envy. It's not jealousy. But see, who wants to use the word envy when they're describing how they're feeling? It's a shit word, right? It's just not a great word. So so the thing I think that works really well about jealousy is whoever coined the term jelly, because then you can look at the pictures and you're like, I'm so jelly. This looks really great. And it doesn't make you out to be like a terrible person. But as it turns out, it's envy. Let's look at why. And then we'll talk about this because this is heavy duty. So this is from Richard Smith and Sung-Hee Kim. Envy typically involves two people and occurs when one lacks something enjoyed by the other. Jealousy typically involves three people and occurs when one fears losing someone to another person. Damn it. Right? Envy and jealousy result from different situations, generate distinct appraisals, and produce distinctive emotional experiences. So here's what makes envy tricky. There is plain envy, and then there is malicious envy. Plain envy, just kind of regular envy is, oh my God, I'm so envious, that looks amazing. Plain envy is, I don't want to take it away from you. Can you be my Greek vacation person?
Yes.
Okay, so I can be, I'm so envious, how was it? And I want you to have it. I may want it too, or may want a like experience, but I don't want to take it away from you. But then there's malicious envy, which is, you didn't deserve that. I want that, and you're going down. Right. So what I think makes it hard, even in the book I write, I'm not committed to using this in the correct way. I remain uncommitted. Because then I feel like I have to say, like, you show me, Carl's like, hey, look at these pictures, Brene, I just got back from Santorini or something. And I'm like, oh my God, is the water really that blue? Does it really look like this? And you're like, it's better in person. I'm like, I'm so envious, but the kind type of envious. I don't hate you or don't think you, then you have to explain it as opposed to saying jealous. But that's not what these words mean. And it makes a difference to use them correctly. Please.
I was just going to say, maybe we could come up with a cute word for envious.
A cute word for envy.
And it wouldn't sound so bad.
We could. We could start it right here. We would be a meme. Envy. As opposed to envy, malicious envy and regular envy. I think that would be really clear, but it may not be subtle enough to work in.
Friendvy.
Friendvy?
Friendvy.
Who said friendvy?
You did.
Friendvy. I like it. Okay, the thing about jealousy to remember that I think we need to flesh out a little bit from Smith and Hikem, is that jealousy involves three people, but it's not always a loss of a person. It's not like Carl and I are great friends, but now, tell me your name. Regine? You and Regine become great friends at work, and it's not like that we're romantically involved, but now you've got a new friend, and I'm losing your time. I'm losing your attention. So it can be friendships, it can be a loss of things other than relationship. It can be time, attention. Does that make sense? Let's watch a clip.
Davey!
Yo, Mr. K.
Yo.
Boom, boom, boom.
Anissa Qureshi? Wow, I'm Mr. Kulkarni. I'm the English teacher, but I'm also the girls' soccer coach. I saw you at the state finals last year. Girl, you like a little Megan Rapinoe. Boom! Are you down to join the team?
For sure.
Yes!
Davey watched in horror as the one cool teacher who used to play favorites with Davey for obvious cultural reasons was won over by Anissa's inviting personality.
Some kind of a work date?
Oh, we're just finished. Yeah. I am gonna run now. I need to get something to eat. I'm starving.
Oh, yeah, great. Oh, is this your purse?
Oh, thank you. Girl, why don't you just stay here and eat with us? Have you had the salmon drop top? It makes me want to drop my top, but I won't. I don't want to impose on your plans. Impose on what? We just gonna be talking the same old shit. Just add your shit to our shit. You sure?
Oh, yeah. Cool, fun.
Yay, fun.
Okay. Those are great jealousy takes, right? So in Never Have I Ever, how many of you have had that experience where you're like a favorite or you're like the chosen one, and then all of a sudden someone comes creeping in on your chosenness, right? And that's not romantic, but there's jealousy. Like, I'm getting ready to lose something. How many of you have had that friendship thing? That piss you off? You're like, hey, you and me are just like, who's she? And like, did you just invite her to join us? You know, and I love, and she's like, here's your purse. Envy occurs when we want something that another person has. Jealousy is when we fear losing a relationship or value part of a relationship that we already have. How many of you willing to try saying, oh, I'm so friendly? Like, I'm so friendly. It's really hard, I think, to say envious. I think also, isn't it one of the big 7 deadly sins or something? That puts a negative spin on it.
And that is a clip that you just heard is an excerpt from Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart special on Max. And it's relevant to today's episode because if you've seen the title of today's episode, it's a little throw to Wizard of Oz, but it says envy, envy, envy. Oh my. Because talking about envy. But before we go deeper into envy and what that is, what it looks like, how it manifests in each type, I like to begin every show by practicing some vulnerability and just talking about some things that are happening in my life. And so right now, yesterday actually, I for the first time in, I want to say over a year, I tried to go for a little run outside. And let's just say, it shows that I have not ran in a while. I used to run all the time, like in middle school. Every Saturday, I got up at like 4:30, 5:30 and ran around the neighborhood. And then I ran 5Ks, and it just slowly progressed to soon I wasn't running out by the time I got to college. So, but yeah, just trying to get back into some mode of physical activity because it is summer, so I haven't really like been physical enough because school's out, so I don't have to walk kids to different places, you know, as a teacher, substitute teacher. So it's just trying to keep my body active, and as well as some more stuff into that. But tune back in for a later episode when I talk about health and well-being. But that's in a few more episodes. But today we're talking about envy. And I want to talk about envy today because it is a big player when we are sitting in these moments of waiting, when we're in this liminal space of life. Gene Stevens and I touched this a little bit in an episode that you'll hear later in the season. But I also wanted to play that clip earlier to give a differentiator between envy and jealousy. Because as you heard, there is a difference not only between envy and jealousy, but then you have plain envy and you have malicious envy. And so it's very crucial that we are able to tell the difference. And why I believe that it's crucial we tell the difference is because I've always felt like weird internally and just mentally from as early as I can remember, honestly, of hearing the word jealousy or hearing somebody say, "Oh, I'm so jelly of you." This was even way before Brene Brown even released that special on Max, or I even read her book, Atlas of the Heart. I just didn't know why hearing the word jealous or jealousy just didn't sit right in the context that we often heard it be used. But when she released Atlas of the Heart, the book, I figured out because she talked about the difference between envy and jealousy, and you just heard about that in the clip. And so, hearing that difference, I realized, oh, the reason why jealousy just never felt right in my spirit is because we, as a human race, have been using the wrong word to describe certain situations. So, a little like fun thing I do now, fun for me, but kind of also annoying at the same time, is now, ever since I've read Atlas of the Heart, anytime someone says that they're jealous of someone, and I understand that what they really are trying to say, that they're envious of someone, I will, in my mind, say, you're envious, not jealous. Just kind of throw in a side right in the conversation right there. But the aside is on to me, so it really makes no difference. And I say that's annoying because I do it so much. I'm like, why am I doing this? I started doing it, to help me remember the difference. But then it became something that I just continue to do and haven't dropped yet. I even do it to this day. And it's been over maybe 2.5 years since I first read Atlas of the Heart. So it's been a while. Hey everybody, I just want to take a quick break from the show to say that I love having conversations with all of my listeners. And one of the ways that I do this is by engaging through social media. And you can follow the podcast at Enneagram Store Podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. I look forward to engaging with you all more on those platforms. In that clip that you just heard from Atlas of the Heart, you heard Brene talk about plain envy and and malicious envy. And how the difference between the types of envy is the intent. Most of the time in modern day times, and where we are now as a human race, when we talk about envy, it's often a plain envy. It is like, oh, you went to Jamaica. I want to go to Jamaica too. But like she said, when we have plain envy, it's not that we want to take away what that person has or experienced or what that person is feeling. We just wish we had our own version of it. So, say I had a friend who went to Jamaica for real, and they came back showing me all their pictures. I'm like, oh, that's nice. I wish I could go to Jamaica too. I'm not saying that I want to take back that experience that person had, or to like brainwash them to believe that they never went to Jamaica. I just wish I in my life could have went to Jamaica as well. Whereas on the other hand, we have malicious envy, and that's where it kind of gets more deathly in both the emotional and mental sense of things, but also possibly even in the physical realm of things. I'm thinking of two movies, you probably never heard of them, but Obsessed, that has Beyonce in it. That's a good example of malicious envy. Because it really wasn't more about that one's a little, I don't know. I'm thinking about those two movies. I'm like, maybe no, it was not envy. That's jealousy. No, those are both the two movies I'm thinking about, Obsessed with Beyonce and Acrimony with Taraji P. Henson, are both like they're both examples of envy relationally wise, because you have two people who are in a relationship, but another person is wanting that lifestyle, and how that relationally is different from jealousy is that relationally, when we talk about envy, is that you want that thing, that relationship, that like feeling that that couple has. Whereas if it was jealousy, it's more of, oh, I'm feeling like I and this person already had a connection, and then you're coming in. And so, to clarify a little bit more, in Acrimony with Taraji P. Henson, there's this, like, she's married to this guy, and there's this another woman who enters the pictures and kind of steals Taraji's husband away from him, if I remember right. It's been a while since I watched it. That woman that steps into the picture is exemplifying envy, but then down the line, Taraji gets jealous of, because that person stepped in and ruined their relationship. Taraji, on the other hand, her character is exemplifying jealousy. So it gets a little bit gray area, it gets a little bit foggy when we talk about jealousy and envy relationally. It's a little bit more difficult to differentiate between which is which, but there is still a clear difference. So that's not even anywhere in my notes for today. But getting back to my notes, the biggest way that envy has showed up in my life, especially at the start of my waiting season, was through relationships. Every single person around me was was either getting married, getting engaged, or dating someone. And it's just a lot of envy that boiled up in me, because going to college, I thought my idea was straight out marriage, living that American lifestyle dream. But here, 24 years old, living single for 24 years, the idea of marriage, the idea of engagement, or even dating someone is a very, very not far-fetched, but it's the probability of it happening anytime soon right now is low. But it's not, and seeing the friends and everyone in these type of relationships, it wasn't like I was trying to step in and take their person. No, it was, I can't really say, because not all the time was I happy, honestly, if I'm being full honest, not all the time was I able to say, I'm happy for you. But even still, even though I might not have been happy, it's not that I want to take that from you so you don't experience it. It was always this, oh, you get to experience this. I wish I had my experience. Not that I want to take that away, whether I was happy for that person or not. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to strike a sword between your relationship and just come in and be Mr. Steal Your Girl. But that would not be cool. So it was, like I said, wasn't plotting to take someone from someone else, but I was hoping that I would have my own someone. So that's plain envy. Now, flip the tables a little bit, and if I would have tried to be Mr. Steal Your Girl, then that in turn translates to malicious envy. Now flip the tables a little bit more and say that I was friends with this girl, and then I became friends with another guy, and that new guy friend stepped in between what me and this girl had going, that's jealousy. Because it's almost as if the link between us is separated when we talk about jealousy. So like I said, it's a lot more easier to clearly state envy versus jealousy when we're not talking about relationships. But because jealousy is based on the contingency of a relationship and how you might feel separated or split apart from someone, it becomes a little bit more gray area, a little bit more harder to clearly define the difference between envy and jealousy when talking about relationships. But it is possible to do that. But in the sense of just envy, you if you think about it, envy is a little bit more easier because that's talking about, you can talk about things with that. Say somebody has, trying to think of a good example. Say I have a friend who has a Jeep Wrangler, which is a car that I've wanted for a while now. Envy in me says, hey, I want that for myself, but I'm not trying to take that from you. But now if I turn that into malicious envy, I would do everything I would start learning possibly how to hijack a car or how to hotwire a car so I could just sneak into their place late at night and blow away with it. That's, you can see a little bit more clearly definition of envy in the sense of things, whereas relationally, it kind of becomes a little bit foggy. So, but the more you study envy and jealousy, the more you perpetuate the difference, like how I do when somebody says, oh, I'm so jealous in a conversation, or I'll say, are you really jealous? And the more you are able to do that differentiation in the moment, the easier it becomes. Words cannot express the amount of gratitude that I have for each and every one of my listeners. So if you would like to support Enneagram Store Podcast even more, you can do so by sending a tip by going to enneagramrestore.com/tip jar. That's enneagramrestore.com/tip jar. That's enneagramrestore.com/TIPJAR. enneagramrestore.com/tip jar. But where I want to go for today in this episode is I want to talk about each type and envy. And so in doing, in preparing for this episode, I've came up with this theory of how envy for each type is rooted in their essence. Now, before we go any further into talking about envy in each type, I've got to back up and I've got to kind of explain what essence is in relation to the Enneagram, because that's not something I've talked about on this show before. So I'm going to put a quick aerial view of essence in relation to the Enneagram. And so when we talk about essence and in the Enneagram, it's essentially our true forms. It's our, like, if nothing had happened to us and we weren't subjected to the negative views of the world, is what we would have truly performed in as adults. And so as a kid, I as a 3 never felt like, oh, my performative nature is what gives me admiration. Had that never been a stain in my personality, then I would have from the get-go began to live in authenticity, not trying to put on different faces and hats to be admired. And so that's what essence is. It's that, what would we be like if we had not been stained, if we had not been tainted by the negative message that we received as children, by that wounding message. And this is just an aside note, but I've been reading More Than a Number by Beth and Jeff McCord, and I like how they kind of put a line in the sand, and have said our beloved child is when we are living out of like complete wholeness, and we're not engaging with, and we're not. I want to try to see how best says. We're not living from that wounding message of this is what. So like for me at 3, you're only loved for the things you do. We're not living from that wounding message, whatever that might be for your type. Whereas our wounded child is living from that wounded message. And so I just really like how that was a clear line of saying of beloved child, you're not living in that wounded message. You're living in a way of wholeness and completedness. Whereas in wounded child, you're faced with the upheavals of what it means to live from that message. Like I said, for a 3, it's the message of that you're only loved for what you can achieve, what you can do for someone. So, but I say all that to say that my theory is that our envy stems from our desire to experience our true selves. So when we see others exhibiting qualities of our essence, we then envy that for ourselves. So when I see someone exhibit authenticity, see a friend, see a stranger be able to be their authentic self, that might spark up a trigger in me and say, I wish I could put all my masks down and engage in my true self. Now, this is only a theory that I have had. As far as I'm aware, there's no other practitioner within the Enneagram, no other enthusiast, no other Enneagram coach that prescribes this theory. So I just want to caution that I'm talking about a deeper level of envy, and every type can still feel envy through the more widely known superficial ways again, through the things that we want, money, cars, houses, stuff like that. Every type can still feel envy in that manner because that's more superficial, that's more earthly. But what I want to talk about in this episode is more of envy in the sense of what is deep in the crevices of our souls. That's where I want to go. So, and I want to start with 8s. So the essence of an 8 is innocence. And innocence in an 8 isn't in the context of law, but rather in the context of childhood. Children live at the helm of curiosity and fun, and sometimes, but not always, necessarily can they protect themselves solely upon themselves. They have to they have to be vulnerable enough to allow adults to protect them, make sure that their well-being to make sure that they're being taken care of in the best possible way, nutritionally, emotionally, physically. So, but for 8, a lot of times they're forced to leave their childhood and become an adult before they're actually ready to be an adult. So the way I see it is that their envy is really in wanting to be childlike again. Their envy is triggered by being able to see other people to engage in this childlike innocence of just having fun and being curious about life. Their desire to stop being the protector of the kingdom, to lay down their sword, to be innocent. That's where envy for an 8 comes into play. To live like a child who lives at the helm of curiosity and fun, and be able to allow themselves to be vulnerable enough to allow someone else to be their protector, to be taken up in the arms of a protector and not be the protector, to just kind of be at the mercy of life, honestly. That's, in my opinion, is where 8s come in the triggering of envy, is their desire for innocence. And for 9s, their essence is right action. And the thing about a 9 is that to avoid stirring the pot, to avoid even the chance or the probability of making a situation worse, they will just not do anything, period. Even if they know, in order to stop the situation, to make the situation better, that they must intervene, they still will take a back row approach. For example, say a family member is spreading an untrue rumor about another family member during a holiday get-together. The 9 knows the truth and knows the right thing to do would be to correct a family member who is spreading the rumor. But instead of taking right action, the 9 just stays to the side, continues to be a bystander, and doesn't choose to intervene on their behalf of their family member. So a 9 be able to see others take right action to say, hey, whether my peace is affected or not, I know this situation is wrong. Something's got to be done about it. So I'm going to take stake and I'm going to intervene in a situation. For a 9 to be able to see someone else do that, that might trigger some envy in them. Now, the route that they take can often coordinate, can often lead them down either path. I believe a 9 in this case can easily go down the path of malicious envy or easily go down the path of plain envy. So I really just think it's a key in a attunement to themselves to say, which path of envy am I taking? And when it's malicious envy for a 9 in the sense, I think it's just really their desire for right action. I think, again, it's this like all or nothing attitude, and that's really where a 9 resides. It's either, for a 9, it's really, I give it my all, or I give it nothing. There's no in between. And so if a 9 does that quick switch from doing nothing to going to right action without any slow progression, then it might quickly turn into malicious envy. So it's really just an attunement to themselves to make sure that they don't go down the path for malicious envy. And if they're going to feel envy, is to go down the plain envy, because that's the more healthy path when it comes to envy. So I want to move on to type 1s. And so the essence of a 1 is serenity. And I just want to take a quick note. You will hear this in the episode later. I want to say it's episode 9. So it's a little bit further down the road, because this is just episode 3. But I was talking with Brian Lee to record while we were recording our conversation together, and he mentioned that for a 1, serenity is less about the meditative state and more about accepting things as they are. And ever since he said that, I've just been blown away, and it's stuck in my head. Because when you think of it, that's truly what it is. It's not all that they need serenity to just sit and be able to meditate. It could be possibly that, but it's more of the fact: do I have to drive to make things perfect? Can I accept life in the imperfections as life is? So it's more about a serenity in the acceptance of imperfections. And so, with that being said, their envy can be rooted in that serenity, in that seeing someone be able to accept life in its imperfections, and being envy of others' ability to be more relaxed and less perfectionistic. I would dare say that, for one, that it's going to be easier for the route of envy that they take to go to plain envy, and it's really going to have to be intentional for them to set out on the path of malicious envy in this case, just in my opinion. Again, this entire episode is really just my theory, my opinions, because as far as I know, no one else in the Enneagram world has thought of this topic. So here I am. Really? But if you know somebody who has thought about this topic and I just didn't find it, well, that's good too. I will ask that you put in the comments, let me know about that, because I was looking for it, but I couldn't find anybody who talked about envy in the Enneagram and in-depth view. So if you know somebody, let me know. I want to take a look at it. But anyway, next type is type 2, and their essence is freedom. And for a 2, freedom is essentially them releasing themselves from servitude. I know that sounds like bad, like there's kind of makes them sound like slaves. They're not. They're not slaves, but they have the idea that they've got to be all things to everyone. They've got to be helping everyone all the time, because helping people is how they gain admiration, how they gain love. This is a point that Suzanne Stabile brings up a lot, because she's a 2, and she often asks herself this question: what is mine to do? That's a good question for 2s to ask. But freedom for a 2 is that releasing of and understanding what is theirs to do, and understanding that they don't have to be all things to everyone all the time. So seeing that freedom, seeing that ability in others is that root of envy. Seeing others be able to say, I don't have to help people all the time. Seeing others be able to say, I'm not your maid. I'm not your end all be all person. You come to me when everything's falling apart, and I'm gonna take care of you all the time. I'm not that person. Be able to hear that from other people, be able to see that in other people, but not be able to really take the action to do it themselves is going to be a little bit of a trigger within a 2, because they're desiring that. They don't necessarily want to be all things to everyone all the time, but they feel that's how they gain acceptance. They feel being all things to everyone all the time is how they get love and admiration. But deep down inside, they just want to be loved for themselves. So seeing people to be able to release themselves from servitude, to be free of that, could be triggering to a 2's envy. And so now we come to my type 3. And the essence of us 3s is authenticity. And that's because we're often wearing a lot of masks, depending on the room and depending on the people we're around. But deep down, our like lower body, our true desire is to be admired for simply who we are and not who we can shapeshift into, but simply being admired for who we are deep down. Maybe we shapeshift into being the best writer, that best book writer, best author that our family, friends know. Because we felt like that as a 3, that would gain love, that would gain admiration. But truly that 3 doesn't even like writing books. So it's that knowing down to what is it that in our heart as a 3 do we actually desire. In our heart as a 3, what is it that we actually want to engage in, want to do. Not everything that we do, not everything that we produce as 3s is necessarily something that we want to do, but it might be something we feel like we've got to shapeshift into doing in order to gain attention, to gain love, to gain admiration. And so seeing other people live authentically can trigger some envy in us. I will say it's kind of hard to do malicious envy in this manner because you really can't. You can, but it's harder to take someone else's authenticity. You have to really become a bully in order to make them feel small, in order to take their authenticity. And so a lot of times this, for a 3 at least, this goes straight to plain envy. Not saying it can't take the turn and go to malicious envy, but in my view, it's going to 99% of the time be a sense of plain envy. Oh, I wish I could be like them, and really just be my true authentic self. Take off all the masks, take off all the hats, all the costumes that I'm wearing, and just be who I want to be, not who I believe people need me to be or need me to achieve to be. And so I'm looking at my notes. I think I forgot. I'm trying to see if this is something I want to keep or if this is something I forgot to delete out my notes. So I'm really reading my notes here real quick. Yeah, that I meant to delete that and then delete that. All right. So moving on to type 4s, their essence is equanimity. And now I'm going to be honest. It was kind of hard figuring out what equanimity meant, honestly. But I'll come back to that in a second. Because of what equanimity means, and the deadly sin are the passion of a 4, which is envy. It's kind of a little bit harder to discuss this for a 4 because their passion is envy, and then equanimity, what that is, it's a little bit difficult. But then we're talking about envy in a broader sense, on a deeper level. So I'm just gonna be honest. I had a tough time with 4s in this, and so hopefully I can work this good and get the point across. But for a 4, the reason why the root of their envy is equanimity is because what equanimity is essentially a balance between your internal mental state. So it's a balance between emotions, mentalness, and internal physical health, kind of. So it's just feeling balanced as a whole person internally. That is what equanimity means. But being that the passion, the deadly sin of the four is envy, it can often be a little bit harder to achieve equanimity, because if equanimity is the root of your envy, but then envy is compounded because it's your passion, you see kind of how that is a loop-de-loop type of idea. It's a little kind of hard to break the cycle. And I wish I could be more forthcoming and more like direct on that, but like I said, it's a little bit tougher because the nature of equanimity and the nature of a four's deadly sin. But just know that their envy is rooted in equanimity and is rooted in a desire for a balanced internal mental state. So it's a little bit, it's tough. Fives, their essence is non-attachment. And non-attachment in the sense of five, it isn't talking about attachment in the sense of possible relationship. Non-attachment in a five is a desire to not be tied down to one perspective or one certain idea. Again, I want to reference back to More Than Your Number by Beth and Jeff McCord. And there's this, I'm gonna read this quote from the book that helps understand the idea of non-attachment in a five better. So in the book they say, I am not what I know. I am God's beloved child. Therefore, I am free to try new things, even if I am not an expert or fully competent in an area. So that expert, being a full expert, being competent in an area, being tied to a certain perspective, a certain idea, cutting that cord and be able to say, hey, I don't know everything about this idea. I don't know everything about this area, this topic. Cutting that cord of saying, I've got to know everything before I even engage in conversation, engage in any discussion about this topic, is desire 4 or 5. So being able to allow themselves change their perspective more easily, and not negating the possibility of two things being true, really is the root of a 5's envy. Being able to say, hey, I can talk about a topic and not be an expert in a topic. Non-attachment to ideas, to perspectives, to topics, to areas of interest. Seeing people be able to do that can trigger envy and say, hey, I, as a 5, I wish that I could talk about a subject without having to know everything about it from the get-go. All right, we're on this now to the second to last type 6. Courage is the true desire, is the essence of a 6. And at the center of courage is faith, a knowing that everything will work out. So for a 6, envy is rooted in a desire to live life with the contingency, to live life without a contingency plan for all the things that might go wrong. To live courageously enough to just be in the flow of life, you know, to let go of their anxieties really is what it truly is all about. Every time I talk about a 6 and their essence of courage, I'm always reminded about the old Cartoon Network show Courage the Cowardly Dog. If you've never seen it, it's a pretty good show. It's all I can say is they don't make shows like that anymore nowadays. But the whole concept of this is that even though he's a cowardly dog, he still goes on to face the things that he's afraid of, to see that, oh, in the end, the things he was afraid of wasn't so bad at all. So it's facing fears, it's facing anxieties, and not having a plan of saying, if something goes wrong, here's my exit strategy, here's my exit plan. But, or rather, if something goes wrong, here's how I can still see myself through it. That's the essence. That's the true desire of a 6, is to just say, hey, I don't have this planned out yet. I don't know if something goes wrong, what to do, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And just to live in the flow, in the river of life. That's how I'm gonna say it. Yeah. All right, so the last type, before I kind of start closing out this episode, is 7s. And the essence of the 7 is sobriety. Sobriety. Is it sobriety or sobriety? Sobriety. I'm gonna go with sobriety. That sounds better. I don't know. Sobriety, whichever way you want to say it. But what sobriety means for a 7 is not living life on a constant experience high, not needing their adrenaline to always be filled to the brim. So envy being rooted in that and saying, hey, I wish I could just be more domesticated, really, more relaxed, not needing to experience the next best fun experience, not needing to be on an experience high all the time. Truly, I would be kind of confused if a 7's envy ever turned malicious out of this, because there's just the course of it. It would be kind of hard to take this to malicious envy, but yeah, it's just this idea. Their envy is rooted in their desire to want to be more settled down and not have to ride every roller coaster possible, not have to do every zip line possible, not have to go on every vacation possible, experience every experience, to be on an experience high as possible, and just be able to say, hey, well, my high right now is just living a domesticated life with my family, career, not trying to escape and feel something through experiences. Envy for a 7 is rooted in their desire to be sober from adrenaline and to be balanced in their adrenaline. Truly. but that's everything that have so far. Like I said, this is a new theory that I really just developed as I was prepping for this episode. Because originally, I was going to go a whole different route with talking about envy and each type, and so. But I was doing some studying on essence, and I saw a connection there, and so I developed this theory. And again, as far as I know, I'm the only person who has this opinion. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, I'm right. But yeah, in short, the way I see it is that envy in each type is rooted in their essence. It's rooted in their true form. It's rooted in who they truly desire to be, and not who they put on to be on the and when they're living an average to unhealthy life. But before I close out this episode, there's one last thing I would like to talk to you about, and that is the E+E Collective. This is something I'm very passionate about, because this is something that I initially was going to start back in 2022, because I was looking for a community to figure out and discuss emotions with. But then I also wanted to start an Enneagram cohort so I could hear firsthand experience of how the Enneagram has taken effect in people's lives to kind of help format this podcast. So I was like, hey, I want these two things. I can't really find neither of them. So I invented the E+E Collective, which Enneagram and emotions, Enneagram plus emotions, or emotions plus Enneagram, however you want to say it, collective. So it's just that it's a collective that's all about talking about how emotions and the Enneagram are working in tandem to help us learn about ourselves and help us become better people. And so the idea of this collective has expanded. Originally, it was an online community of 25 people around the world, who would gather once a month on Zoom to discuss those two things, the Enneagram and emotions. But as I started to revisit this idea a couple months ago, I decided, I was looking, how can I make this collective more than just a once a month thing on Zoom? So I came up with this. Of course, there's still the idea that I still once a month Zoom, but now everybody will have the opportunity to meet with people from around the world if you're a part of the collective once a month. But then we have a Discord server to have that continual access to community throughout the month, no matter if it's that one night session together or not. But then I've also made tiers. So one tier is the founders tier, and this thing, the founders option, is only open until July 12th. That's the last day to register for the founders. It's $50 a year. But the thing about being a founder is, in addition to being a part of collective via Zoom and Discord, founders throughout the year can schedule as many one-on-one meetings, coaching sessions with me, or just, they want somebody to talk with. Hit this link, schedule time, unlimited throughout the year. Founders also have the opportunity to be involved in training so that they can be a group leader for the entire collective during the session, or even the idea is when this collective grows past 25 people that we will begin to split off into smaller sections. There'll be founders who lead those groups, the smaller groups. But then also founders are basically the board members of this collective, because they're going to be the ones who I'll look to for input on the future of the collective, how to mold this better. But then also founders have the ability to get access to the recorded Zoom sessions for free. So there's a whole lot of perks to the founders. And for the founders, and both for just the standard collective member, more perks will be added. But that's a whole lot for the founders just here in the very outset. And it's only $50 a year. So pretty inexpensive. But then to be just a standard collective member is $35 a year. But the thing about being a standard member is you get access to Zoom sessions and Discord server just as the founders do. But the only additional benefit that you get is that you get to meet with me one-on-one for whatever reason you may want to. But however many of those times you do is limited to 5 meetings a year. And so I have a tracker. So I'm very strict about this. You have 5. But here's the thing: if you don't use your 5 and you're a standing collective member, those 5 one-on-ones carry over to the next year less ones. So I say somebody is a standard collective member and they have 2 one-on-one sessions left that they didn't use for the year. Well, then the next, when their renewal period comes, they'll have 1 extra one-on-one for the next year. So instead of having 5 in the new year, after they renew their membership, they'll have 6. So, but if this sounds like something, and I hope it does, because like I said, this is a worldwide thing. It's open to anyone across the globe: United States, Mexico, Canada, Alaska, Hawaii. I realize I said the United States, Hawaii, and Alaska, and those are states. But pay no mind to it. India, Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia, Russia. I don't know why I said Russia like that, but I did. I did it again. Anyone can be a part of this group. The idea is that you be English speaking or have an English translator, because I don't know. I'm gonna say I'm fluently English. I know Greek. Learning Swahili, learning French, learning Arabic, and learning Spanish, but I'm not fluent in Greek, Swahili, Arabic, Spanish, French enough to have conversations. So ideally, if you speak another language, you should also be able to speak in English, so I can truly connect with you, or at least have a way to translate what you're saying. Yeah, so that's the idea. But anybody is welcome. A non-discriminatory group. The only discriminatory thing is that you have to pay for it, and then it's only 25 spots. And within those 25 spots, there are only 10 founder spots. So 25, 10 of those are founders. If those 10 are taken before July 12th, sorry, but no more founder spots are open at this time. If those 10 are still open by July 12th, when the cutoff date for founders gets here, well, then whatever is left will be converted to standard collective member spaces. So say there are 5 founder spots left over, and those 5 then become standards. So instead of having 15 standards and 10, and 10 founders, you got 20 standard and then 5 founders. So it's a whole complex system on how that's working out. But I've also been thinking about maybe discounting founders. But anyway, but right now you can join as a founder, get a ton of benefits for $50 a year, or you can join as a collective member for $35 a year and get a few benefits by going to enneagramrestore.com/founder. Now that link is going to be in the show notes. So if you're on YouTube, just scroll down to this video description is going to be there. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts, scroll down there too. enneagramrestore.com/founder is going to take you to the registration page for the founders. But if you look at the very bottom of that page, it's going to say, hey, click here if you want to register as a collective member. And that will then take you to the $35 a year option. So it's not the way I wish to handle that, but that was the best way to do it. So, But yeah, just go to enneagramstore.com/founder. And again, that link and any other links that have been mentioned throughout this episode will be in the show notes as always for easy access, because I can't remember stuff, so why should you? I'm going to put it in the show notes, okay? Don't worry about it. I got you, friend. Now, with all that being said, that is all that I have for today's episode of Enneagram Store Podcast. Again, thank you for listening. I appreciate every single person who supports this podcast by pressing play, whether you're playing the video on YouTube or whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or listening on Spotify. However you are listening or watching this, I appreciate you for hitting that play button. But I really could use your help, because I'm in this moment of trying to grow this podcast, trying to give more value to it, through the way it looks, to the way it sounds, to the way it feels, to the topics discussed. But I could really, really, really use your help in making a lot of that happen. And there's a couple ways that I want to talk about real quick of how you can make that happen. The first is what you just did now, is pressing play and listening to the podcast. And I'm going to admit, you don't have to actually be actively engaged in watching or listening. If you want to put it on the background, that's well. Sometimes what I do is I will go on Apple Podcasts on my phone and hit play, turn my volume all the way down, and just run the entire podcast, every single episode, all the way through. It counts as a play count, and it helps keep the stats up. The thing about stats when it comes to podcasting is that is a major thing that advertisers look at. And so right now it's just very hard for me to even get asked to help support revenue to the podcast that way, because just like a lot of advertisers have a higher than what is currently happening in this podcast for wanting to put ads on a platform. So really could use more play counts and more listings and in that manner to help get ads that way. But you can also help support this podcast by giving financial support directly, and you can do that by giving a tip by going to enneagramstore.com/tipjar, TIPJAR. But don't worry, that link is going to be in the show notes, because I can't remember it most of the time, so why should you? But yeah, you go there, you can give $1, I believe, is the lowest you can go. $5, $10, you can specify. But you can give any amount, and that will help me purchase more equipment, purchase a better microphone, purchase more lighting. So that you can probably tell the lighting looks a little bit imbalanced, because I'm using one studio light, and then my ceiling lights in my apartment, and then help from the sunlight coming in the window. So it's kind of hard to balance the light out at times, but if you can give financially, that would be great. That will help me build a budget to buy more light that I can keep consistent by getting more studio lights and everything. So that is one way you can help. It's helping me upgrade equipment through giving financially. You can also help by just leaving a review and rating us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. As I say all the time, I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so if it's a good review, leave it. If it's a bad one, leave it. And I have links on how you can do that on the website at enneagramstore.com/review. You can click, there's an option to review on Apple Podcasts, or there's an option to rate on Spotify right there on our website. And so again, that link will be in the show notes, because if I can't remember a link, I don't want you to have to remember, because half the times all these links I tell you on this podcast, I have to look them up multiple times just to memorize them enough to say it for each episode. So I'm not going to force you to memorize them. They're going to be in the show notes. If you're on Apple Podcasts, just scroll down. If you're on YouTube, just scroll down right there below here, close to all the way to the bottom. So, but yeah, what happens when you leave a review is that you tell Apple, hey, or you tell Spotify, I believe in the value, I believe in the content of this podcast. distribute this podcast more so more people can discover it. And that's essentially what's happening when you leave a review. And the last way you can help is by following and subscribing to Enneagram Restored Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Yes, we are on Facebook and TikTok now, so you should start seeing a lot more content there. I chose to do Facebook because, as opposed to Instagram, I can post links there for people to have easy access to. And then TikTok, I just like be nice to post some snippets to try to get more engagement too. So I'm testing out some new things here, but for sure you can always find us on Instagram, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Whether or not I continually to do Facebook and TikTok is in question, because like I said, those are two platforms I'm testing some new things out with. So, but those are all ways you can help support this podcast, help me bring more value to this podcast. But just know this, whether you decide to leave a review, whether you decide to follow and subscribe, whether you decide to just press play again and again and again, or whether you decide to actually give some of your money to the podcast, either way, whichever way, if you choose one or if you choose multiple, or if you choose all, whichever options you choose, I want you to know that I am eternally grateful and eternally appreciative of you supporting the podcast in that manner. I will go to the grave thanking you forever for supporting this podcast in any way possible. So, but with all that being said, it's time that I close out this episode. And I say the same thing every episode. Been saying this line since the very first episode that released on March 21st in 2021. So if you're a return listener and you know it by now, or maybe you're new and you've been listening to the podcast ever since this season started and you know this already, I invite you to say this with me, because it's a true statement. It's what I live by. It's the reason why I created this podcast, and it's this: the Enneagram doesn't define you, but it does bring restoration. It helps reshape your thinking and habits.